Now I think I'm 50-50. I think the world is 50% chaos and you just don't know what's coming your way. And 50% energy, which I know is a little bit of an overused term, but I do think that there's a lot to be said for the energy you put out there being sent back to you in some form.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. Over the past half-century, Egyptologists, biblical scholars, and others have proposed naturalistic explanations for the 10 plagues, trying to match them with disasters brought on by the Nile River, volcanic eruptions, and even comets. These interpretations strive to locate the story in the realm of scientific possibility. Such theories, while sometimes fun to ponder, ultimately miss the point of the Exodus story, which is, after all, a story, not a catalog of scientific data. But what if these plagues were to happen today? Would we even recognize them as such? Today's guest has written and performed a modern take on the 10 plagues.
We're delighted to chat with Eva Bilick, an actor, writer, and producer behind the 2020 podcast series A Place Called Fairneck and the 2018 web series Weird in Bed. Eva, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, on your website, you describe yourself as serving Kat Dennings' attitude with a side of Jennifer Connelly eyebrow gang. Please explain.
Originally, I wrote that because my eyebrows used to be a lot more intense. They have since calmed down in their appearance. So I was trying to do the Jennifer Connelly eyebrow situation comparison. But the reason I chose those two actors was because industry people are always asking you, like, who are you like? Whose career do you want? You know, who can I compare you to? They want people in mind immediately. So I thought I would just go with two opposites. Kat Dennings, like heightened comedy. Jennifer Connelly, not.
So your 6-part podcast series, A Place Called Fairneck, is a darkly humorous tale narrated by a teenage journalist, Michal Rabinowitz. The story, which takes place a week before Passover, is punctuated by jumps between the present and the past, relationship drama, unexpected death, and mysterious events that recall the biblical plagues: frogs, hail, wild beasts, darkness, lice, and so on.
Sometime between 11:54 last night and 8:02 this morning, someone broke into the place, flooded it with water, and planted 182 frogs. I know, and everyone's a suspect. Last night got pretty heated here on West Englewood Avenue. All that's clear is that the culprit had a message for Joey.
It'll be fine. Sales will be fine. No one is gonna find out. We'll reopen tomorrow. It's fine.
You said fine too many times.
Oh, God.
So what inspired you to do this clever rendition of Passover themes?
Well, I'm from Teaneck, New Jersey. Is anyone here from Teaneck? No. So it's a very Jewish town. If you have not been there, I have often heard it described as the Jerusalem of America. I don't know if I agree, but people have said that to me. So I came up with the idea for one scene. I'm not a trained writer, so this is like the weird way that I tend to write. I'll come up with one scene that I like, and then I will base the entire story around that one scene. And it was very important that the scene was set in Teaneck. So I was like, well, if I'm going to tell any kind of story, I didn't even know it was a podcast yet, but I was like, if I'm going to tell a story based in Teaneck, it has to be Jewish. And I thought Passover is my favorite Jewish holiday. I just think it's fun, it's magical, it's for all ages. So I thought those would be really fun themes to play with.
Is there a story of how you came up with Fairneck as opposed to Teaneck? I know you wanted to preserve the anonymity of the place.
Yeah, it's very important to me. It is a combination of Fair Lawn, New Jersey and Teaneck, New Jersey. I thought they both kind of represented what I was going for. So shows how much effort I put into naming things. Generally, naming things I find to be really stressful. Like in any script that I write, people are called like Girl 1, Girl 2 until I absolutely have to name them, and then I'll plug in names.
So I was thinking about this earlier as it happens, about the importance of naming people, naming places, and how much we stress over it. We anguish over that for writing fiction and so forth. And yet all of us are kind of born into this world with a name. Sure, we can change it maybe later on, but ultimately we're stuck with names. And yet when we are the namers, if we're like new parents or whatever, we go so deeply into the name catalog, trying to find the perfect name that we want this new person or whatever to have. And then later on we regret it, usually, because we're like, well, that's a name that I liked 15 years ago, and now it's kind of embarrassing, and we're stuck with it. I don't know if you had any similar, now that you're kind of, years removed from this project, if you've had similar kind of second thoughts about any of those kinds of things.
Well, you're describing perfectly why I've never gotten a tattoo. And I agree. I think it's a lot of pressure to name things. I don't have kids, so I've never had the pressure to name a child, but that is a big responsibility. And what if you name the kid after someone who like turns out isn't a great person or the person you thought they were? So that's a really interesting thought you just gave. I don't have anyone. Actually, a lot of people in this story are named after people in my life because I figure if I'm going to base this town on Teaneck, so like my sister's name is Michal. Like my friend, one of my best friends, Danielle, her last name's Kirscher. Another one of my close friends, Allison, her last name's Rabinowitz. So I was just kind of naming things. So the names were very close to my heart because they're people that I love, and luckily I don't love them. But yeah, there's a while where like every woman in any script I wrote was named Adelaide. I don't know why. And I'm like, I don't know why I kept putting that name into the world so many times. Doesn't have any personal meaning to me. But yeah, no regrets.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. Your character, Michal Rabinowitz, mixes town news and gossip while reporting on events in Fairneck, a predominantly Jewish, mostly modern Orthodox town in New Jersey. The character's Jewishness is, of course, a part of their lives, with kosher restaurants, a Jewish school, and so forth. But there's also flirting, rivalries, stress, relationships, and other universal subject matter. How important was it to humanize the characters and avoid stereotypes?
Well, I appreciate the implication that there weren't any stereotypes. I think I definitely had some in there by the end. It started out very important. I think the truth is that with the limited resources I had, it became harder to make it as authentic as I wanted it to be. If I had like all the money and resources that I wanted for this project, I would have been really excited to like hire a Shul choir or some kind of Jewish choir, or have just like a room full of Jews who are familiar with like Jewish songs, and record music and have a lot more kind of like just background music and Jewish sort of sounds. I don't even know how to put it, but like I think I would have really appreciated the opportunity to have those kinds of really authentic touches. But then with the limited budget I had and the limited time that I had, I found myself at one point kind of rushing to finish and get it recorded by a certain date so that everybody would be available. I just kind of wrote as best I could. And I think it came out really cute. I think it came out sweet. But there are certainly characters where I listen and I'm like, that kind of sounds like someone who has like heard of Judaism writing a Jewish character, but maybe not actually totally immersed in the culture. But you live and learn.
There are a lot of Jews who don't know that much about Judaism. So, I mean, even that is authentic.
That's true. That's true. And I mean, I'm like fourth generation, New York Jew. So there are certainly Ashkenazi Jews who I know from the tri-state area who fit perfectly stereotypes to the T. Like you meet them and you're like, were you written by a 12-person writing team? So that definitely does come up actually in Jewish life. But I also really I did want to portray Jewish life as something that's like not just a funny sitcom joke, but something that is like rich and meaningful and very real. So hopefully some of the podcast reflected that.
Yeah, there are types that are legitimate and they go stereo. So, I mean, these are based on, even the stereotypes are based on something, right? So at the end of the first episode, your character, Michal, says, quote, "We don't always have control over the outcomes of our choices, but we do control the choices themselves. Even the smallest choice, like what shirt to wear and which route to drive home, can lead to events we never could have predicted. They might even lead to events you thought were impossible. This encapsulates the push and pull between conscious decisions and randomness that occur throughout the series. Is this your own outlook on life? Are you maybe a determinist like Spinoza?
My worldview has shifted since recording this podcast. And I think at the time I really did think like it's all just random. Now I think I'm 50-50. I think the world is 50% chaos and you just don't know what's coming your way. And 50% energy, which I know is a little bit of an overused term, but I do think that there's a lot to be said for the energy you put out there being sent back to you in some form. And people use words like you put into the universe or, there's like psychological and religious terms for it. So I don't really know where I'm not particularly religious, but I do think that there's some kind of, physical, scientific basis for that kind of energy that's always flying around. So I think I'm split.
Each episode begins, in Fairneck, we used to think the plagues of Egypt were a thing of the past. We're not so sure anymore. At your Seders, do you ever try to make the plagues more relevant, perhaps by looking at the real-life plagues that haunt us today? Do you bring that kind of energy to your Seder?
Always. Yeah. Actually, I was raised with that. So I remember when I was a teenager, we really started to bring those ideas in. And then the first time I ever hosted a Seder as an adult, it was actually not that long. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I was living in LA and I couldn't afford to go back to the East Coast. So I just invited everybody I knew in LA at the time, which was like 10 people, to a big Seder. And I printed out articles of like modern day slavery, and I had people kind of come in with their own ideas of what that meant to them. And I think it's such an awesome way to do Seders. Now my sisters each have little kids, so if I am with my family, our Seders tend to be very kid friendly, so there's not as much of that kind of discussion. But I think it's such an important thing to add if you're able. What about you guys?
Well, I've come to believe that we probably wouldn't even have Seders in the Jewish culture if our history wasn't the way that it is, meaning the situation of being persecuted minorities through the ages has really emphasized this story for us. The story was a story among others, and we sort of glommed onto it because it resonated with our experience. And I think, like you're saying, you can read new things into it. You can sort of empathize with even the suffering of others, which is, very typical these days in the Seder. And I think because we're a suffering people, this is like our jam.
It really is, isn't it?
You have to laugh to stop from crying. I think the Seder positions itself well. Purim is that kind of springboard leading you in that direction. But yeah, the Seder does loom large, I guess. I think what you're saying is true, Jonathan. That's the reason that it figures really important in Jewish dialogue. And also, I think like bringing it back to Eva's podcast, it's, it also felt very intergenerational. Like I felt happy listening to it in my mid-30s, but I think I could also envision listening to it with a teenager or with an, elder adult, maybe without the experience of podcasts. I thought, it worked very much in that Passover way.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Eva, if it's okay to ask, I would love to hear, in the couple of years that it's been out, what's the reception been on it? And are people using it at their Passover?
People have been very, very nice about it, especially people in the podcast world, which is a really welcoming world. I didn't know anything about it, but I met a lot of podcast professionals when I started writing this. I was trying to sort of see what that space was all about. And I met a lot of really awesome people who taught me a lot about what it means to podcast and how there are no rules, which is still true. And so that was really awesome. People were really nice. People were really receptive. I will still get like messages online here and there about people who found it, and I've been really enjoying listening to it. I think from like the behind the scenes standpoint, we were really excited to release it because we were thinking that it could be, on like much bigger platforms, maybe turn into an animated show. So we had kind of high hopes, and then the pandemic hit. Like, I think quarantine started maybe like the week that we released the first episode. So it was just not the time where we were going to ask people to donate money so that we could, have a big fundraiser and try to do something else with it. I had lined up a bunch of meetings with people that I was really excited about, and they all got canceled. Someone went from Audible, was really excited about it, but then I think he left Audible pretty soon into that. I did have one meeting with a producer. When I was thinking it could be a really fun animated kids show. And I spoke to a handful of people who were in animation, and I got kind of clear on what that could look like. And I put together a whole presentation, and I talked to this guy, and he said, no, it's too Jewish. No one's going to watch that. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more Jewish content out there. He's like, no, you'll never sell this. So he didn't see the vision. I think that if it were still something I was feeling really passionate about, I could probably reach out now and try and build something. I think I'm just going to let it be what it is. It's a lovely little one-season podcast that people are welcome to enjoy forever if they want. So it's very nice that people like to enjoy it. There were some hopes for it to be something that I could build on, but the pandemic had other plans.
I think maybe another approach would be to turn it into a book or a storybook or series. I think there is some, potential audience for that. Maybe not in the cartoon realm because he got turned down, but maybe another avenue.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about storytelling in general, is that you can do so much with any story depending on the medium. And I think for storytellers, it's really important to know what medium you want something to take shape in, so that you can be really specific about how people receive the story. But anything can be, yeah, exactly, a book, a podcast, a film, a show, a live show. I think there's a lot of options. So this could be something, if I decided to pick it up in the future, it actually might really be fun as a live show, actually, because we could get some really cool effects in there.
Switching gears a little bit, your web series Weird in Bed presents short vignettes of awkward situations in the dating life of your character Molly, and the guy who answers his phone, and the guy who gets high, and the guy who serenades you, and other guys.
You ever think about what it'd be like to kill someone?
No.
So aside from being very funny, is there something more going on here? Maybe these videos can be therapeutic for women who've experienced off-putting moments of intimacy.
I mean, it's therapeutic in the sense that there are a few things that bring you together, like sharing terrible dating stories with people. So I think that finding anything reflected back in that light is always kind of nice. But if that reaction comes about, that's very nice. But I didn't write it for any really nice, kind reason. I really just wrote it because everyone told me when I first moved to LA I have to write my own stuff. So I was like, let's start really simple. 2-minute episodes, sketches, same room every time. I just need one guest actor every time. So I was just trying to be as simple as possible about it.
Yes, of course, they're very minimal and kind of appealing in that sense. I like the stripped down aesthetic. Maybe it was therapeutic for you, though. Maybe it resonated with or expressed some of your own awkward situations you've lived through.
I haven't been single for a couple of years, but I was dating for years. And dating is a wild concept because you're just meeting strangers. Sure, maybe a little bit about them before you meet, but generally you're just, you have no idea what you're about to get into. So I've had some wild surprises. I met someone who told me everything seemed to be great. He was an artist who was lovely. I was asking him a lot about his art. And then about halfway into the date, he told me that his real name is Satan and that he goes by Seth as sort of a mask in the world, but really he appreciates when people know his true identity. And then we talked about Satan for another hour, which was funny, and I got a kick out of it, but didn't expect that. Probably wouldn't have gone on the date if I knew. And stories like that just had to come up, especially I think when maybe this isn't true, but maybe when you're in a big city, you don't just never know what kind of character you're going to meet.
A higher statistical chance of running into Satan, I suppose.
Yeah, if you guys bump into him, let me know. He's a nice guy, turns out.
And an artist.
And an artist. Yeah, likes to sketch.
Are you working on anything now that you'd like to share with our audience?
I'm not writing anything now. I've been acting a lot, which has been a really nice surprise because the industry's pretty dead right now. So it's been really a treat to be on set and auditioning a lot. So I have a commercial running now. If you like sports betting, you might see me in a gambling commercial, so you can sign up for that app. That's probably the only thing people are going to catch. I think some other things are going to come out in the fall, but it'll be a little while.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Eva.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really nice to talk to you guys.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.